is Joe Betar.
This is Ramon Robles.
And we talk to fascinating people about their love of hunting, shooting sports, and the outdoors. This is Hunting Matters.
So we started the show, Ramon?
I don't know.
I guess we have.
This whole podcast thing, there are no rules.
Joe Rogan it. We're just, we're on. We're recording. We've been recording for 35 minutes.
So Joe Rogan is a host. He's a podcaster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of a big deal.
Okay. Kind of, I think I've heard of that guy. He has a future in this business,
Yeah. Ramon spent time at Mar-a-Lago, so he knows who Joe Rogan is.
Twice, but look, who's counting, honestly?
Yeah. Hey, Ramon.
Yes, sir.
Anything about me today?
You got a haircut.
And?
Oh, did you shave your beard?
Shut up.
When it's that long to begin with, and you bring it down to that.
Here's why the beard's not here anymore. I was going to trim it and neaten it up for you because I last week you commented on your beard and you're like, what's going on?
Yep.
So I'm like, mine looked like a 30 years, but it was, so I break out the razor today and I'm like, and the guide pops off the top and goes, yeah. So I could have come in with a skunk stripe look, but I figured. No. And of course, the temperatures drop into the 30s in Houston, Texas once a year. And this is the week that it happens. And this is the week that I decided to screw the beard up.
Yep. No, you look fine.
Plus, I'm guiding for the next 2 weekends, so I might need it out, but it's all gone now. So if you could cut half yours off, Ramon, and put it in a bag, I'll stop by and pick it up and glue it on.
You're going to propagate it?
Yeah, I'll propagate it. That's right. I'll promulgate the species of hair. Hey, folks, this is Hunting Matters. We're back again with Ramon and Joe, and our guest once again this week is Chester Moore. Chester's been a frequent guest of ours and always brings exciting stories to our forum and our little show here. So, Chester, thank you once again for joining us.
Oh, it's always great to be on with you guys. And
so Ramon, I get an email from Chester. I don't know, about 20 minutes ago. I finally saw it. I'm looking through the auction catalog, improving stuff. We're getting ready for our annual convention coming up in January, and it says, "Hey, I'm out in the bush in the middle of nowhere. Is this is video? This is audio podcast, right?" I'm like, "Nah, we're big time now."
Yeah.
So he actually had to go in and get a wet nap, I guess, and clean his face off and throw a cap on.
I got in time to take a shower because I did look like a swamp rat or some kind of a refugee from Deliverance with all my junk paint and everything on my face. So I figured I didn't want to terrify everyone on the show.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, the name of the show is Hunting Matters. I don't think we expect any cleanliness.
Yeah, well, what I saw in the mirror was not what I wanted to represent me, even in the hunting field. You know what I'm saying? They're like, "Oh my God, what is going on there?" Yeah. But it was just funny because I have a buddy of mine that's been on mine. I had to look like me. It's just funny.
Hey, Ramon, what's the first line of the script that comes to mind when you hear the reference to the movie Deliverance?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The line that always got me was the one before that where he says, "You have a pretty mouth." And
got a pretty mouth.
I've always been to horror movies my whole life. That's actually probably more horror than a horror movie, and that it keeps me packing heat in the woods right there. If anything keeps me packing heat in the woods, it is Deliverance.
Yeah.
I love that movie, but that's a difficult movie to make myself sit down and watch again, especially when it gets to that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read a lot of the stories behind that movie and it was made and all that stuff, but I think that guy out in the woods that day I think he's a direct descendant or direct line of a relative with that Billy Bob Thornton character in Sling Blade.
Yeah.
That's funny. I've never seen that movie the whole way through. I just know, all the pop culture references, and not Sling Blade, Deliverance. I've never seen it. I mean, I know of it. I know what happens. It's just been part of pop culture for so long that I guess just through being alive, I've discovered what the whole movie's about.
Yeah, you really need to sit down and watch it at least once.
Yeah.
There's sorry to digress. Ramon and I are movie nuts. I think, Chester, you are too. But
yes, for sure.
Let's call it Hunting Matters. We ought to call it Hunting Matters and Movie Reviews. But that Passion of the Christ is hard to rewatch. Hard to watch in the first place. There was another one I was thinking of the other day that was really tough to watch that I really loved, and I just started watching it. But Chester, I was flipping channels this weekend when it was rainy and cold outside, and unfortunately I wasn't sitting in a deer blind, but I ran across The Revenant and watched that again.
Another easy one to watch.
But 3 hours of, I mean, you got to commit, and it's so good.
I'm trying to.
That is about the famous mountain man. Leonardo DiCaprio played him.
Yeah.
And it's loosely based on the story of the guy from up in, Montana or South Dakota, one that was evidently attacked by a bear and crawled across several mountain ranges and survived.
Yeah, he's perpetually cold in the whole movie. He keeps getting thrown into water, which is just kind of unfortunate for Leonardo.
Yeah, and that character that it was based on was, the mythology around him was that he was an Indian hunter as well, and he would eat the liver of other human beings, which was evidently not true. He disputed that, but a really interesting story about that guy. So Chester, what have you been up to, man? I know you've been involved in a lot of things. I got several things I want to talk to you about, but what's your latest adventure?
Latest adventure is last week. I was working with the Wild Sheep Foundation out at Elephant Mountain Wildlife Management Area, and eventually a couple of days later over to the Franklin Mountain State Park in El Paso for the capture and release of bighorns to restore bighorns in the Franklin Mountains for the first time in over 100 years. And got to document that, the story up at Wild Sheep Foundation on that I wrote and shot some photos for. And that was just an epic. I've been on a capture before, watched the capture for a couple of days, but to actually see the entire process over to capture, get the sheep over, have medical tests come back on the sheep, sweat bullets because you think, oh man, hopefully they're disease-free in the mountains was a pretty epic thing for the hunter conservationist movement in Texas and beyond.
Yeah, I talked to. By the way, that was a project that Houston Sparkler Foundation helped partially fund as well through our conservation grants program. So, I couldn't go, but I got a call from Kevin Hurley at Wild Sheep, and he was just. You could hear the excitement in his voice. Yep. He said, we caught these sheep; they were disease free. He said this was probably the biggest public crowd that they ever had at a release between the press and the public. He said, I've done sheep releases all over the U.S. and Canada. And he goes, this is probably one of the largest. And he also talked about the fact that they captured a large amount of youth.
80, I think it was, it's in my story, but I think it's like 85% or whatever it was of ewes were pregnant. So they put 77 sheep on the mountain. And if they're all healthy in the spring, there's going to be over 100 in the Franklin Mountains here in the spring, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, the Bighorn Sheep program in Texas. I mean, Wild Sheep and other organizations do. Texas Bighorn Society and all those groups do such a great job. But I kind of, and maybe I'm over dramatizing it, but I kind of liken the Texas Sheep program to the recovery of wild turkey in the U.S. I think it's amazing what this program has done.
It's incredible. I mean, I remember as a kid, I had this scrapbook. I still have them. I would cut sports of field and outdoor life and field and stream out and my dad and paste stuff we wanted to go hunt. I had a page from a Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine, and I still have this one, and it's from 1977. I used to go go to the thrift store and buy every magazine for a nickel they had in the outdoors. And this page had the 1977 game animal population. So it was like white-tailed deer, 4 million. Wild turkey, I think it was at the time, like 300,000 or whatever it was. And it said, and I went, whoa, there's a big dive. And, that kind of connected me getting interested in this. So from all the way there as a little bitty runt to seeing this happen and a lot of things in that program, Texas is on the eastern fringe of the desert bighorn, the easternmost range of the desert bighorn. So it never was believed to have a mega population, maybe in the late 1800s, around, 2000, 1500, you've heard different estimates. But they got it back from 0 in the 50s to 40 in the 70s. And then in 2019, disease, which stricken all of these herds in other states, struck Texas really for the first time in 100 years. And disease was linked to aoudad populations, Mycoplasma pneumoniae. And so putting these in this Franklin Mountain State Park is really interesting because it's an urban park in a lot of ways, big mountain range. but about 2/3 of that thing's protected by the city of El Paso. So not going to be an aoudad incursion there. There are no big stocks of domestic sheep and goats which can transfer. So it's a big positive. And the other thing, Kevin had mentioned, it was great seeing all these guys I talk to all the time together at the release. We've been talking about covering this thing for a year, that the public was so engaged. Now there's a place the public can go in Texas and have a legitimate chance of hiking up and seeing bighorns, photographing them, exposing them to a game animal that a lot of Texans, a lot of hunters don't even know that we have in Texas.
Yeah. Was that the first time they put sheep in that mountain range?
Yep. They haven't been there since 100, maybe 120 years ago.
Yeah. Man, I'm very fingers crossed that thing takes off and that they see the success they've had at Elephant Mountain and other areas in Texas, and that people have a respect, hunting and non-hunting have a respect for that species. And I'm hoping that they will, be guardians of those animals so they can proliferate. It'd be great to be driving along the highway in that part of Texas and see those things roaming, just like you see the audads running across the highway now. Don't get me wrong, I love to hunt aoudad sheep, and I think they're very cool animals, but we all know that you've got to displace some of that population in order to get your bighorn sheep up and running. And but it'd be so cool to be able to go, hey, look, there's a bunch of bighorn sheep up on the mountain.
Yeah, you're right. And I think this is that opportunity for the public and people to be engaged. When you think about the population booming and you think about all the development around the nation, and here's an urban center that's going to have a population of these animals. And, the first conservation group I ever joined in my life was the Texas Bighorn Society, which is crazy. I was 19 years old, and I started my career because I wrote an essay about hunting as conservation. As a senior in high school for Texas Parks and Wildlife, I won a lifetime combo license. I went to this event called the Texas Wildlife Expo, had the award handed me by Nolan Ryan, which freaked out my 19-year-old mind. And that's where I started my career. And I remember loving wild sheep, and I remember seeing this booth that said Texas Bighorn Society. There's a society for Texas bighorns. And so that was the first conservation group I ever joined, and they do great work. Dr. Sam Cunningham, a good friend of mine, is the president of that group. And in the second conservation group I ever joined was the Houston Safari Club, which is interesting because of my early mentor, Tony Hausman, who was a past president of HSC. So it's cool to see, and even my personal life on this, a lot of history, a lot of things I kind of rub shoulders with happening on this mountain. You think about the money and work, the Wild Sheep Foundation, Texas Bighorn Society, Houston Safari Club Foundation, other groups. It was like a coalition coming together, working with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department to put together something that was historic. And I think in today's age, all the crazy things going on, it's great win-win stories that are really going to make a mark for conservation.
Yeah. And, kind of selfishly, the other thing we were excited about is a lot of those students, PhD, master's level students that participate in that program are also scholarship recipients of ours. Yep. So it's kind of a two-pronged deal for us. I was like, man, it's so exciting. I wish I could go. I just couldn't get away. But, I've seen the pictures of some of the students, and I was looking up, some of the preliminary information that's come out. I'm like, oh, that guy or that young lady got a scholarship from us last year, whatever. That's very cool. You're talking about that urban model. I've seen that work, whether it was on purpose or not. But the first time I went to Banff, Canada, we went up there skiing years and years ago, and we were in the park that was inside the city of Banff Springs. There were hundreds of elk everywhere. Now, the locals didn't care for them because, they're these giant elk, and if they go in the rut and they're in the city park, that's one thing. But they have that philosophy of they're ours, they're elk, that this is their land. We're going to protect and respect them. But it's very cool to be like us going to a city park here in Houston and seeing, a bunch of, seeing whitetail there, or seeing a bighorn sheep just outside of El Paso. I mean, it can work. These urban projects, obviously they can work. So I'm excited to see where this goes. Do you think that you're going to write a follow-up story a year from now on the status of the herd and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. I'm sure they'll want me to do one for wild sheep, because they stay really engaged at Wild Sheep Foundation, all these projects, guys like Kevin Hurley talking with all the biologists and everything. And so it's always exciting to get to do that. And I love to write about anything outdoors, but when you get to do something like that, it's extra special, and it reminds me of why I do what I do, like that's the fun stuff.
So forgive my ignorance. This urban model you have talked about, that is literally introducing these species into a park or whatever in the heart of the city?
This is overlooking the city of El Paso, and it rises up to like 7,000 feet, which is higher than anything in the Smokies or anything. And so it's like outside the city, but it's like within city metro area, and then, but a lot of these places, probably like in Banff and Estes Park, Colorado, it's like they didn't introduce the elk. Just the city got built, and the elk went, sweet, we can hang out. I mean? But it gives you a place to see them and people who would never encounter them backpacking or hunting.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what Joe was talking about. Like there's areas where the whole public, not just the hunting or hiking public, can engage them.
So there's got to be some sort of campaign, or maybe I'm wrong, to let citizens know, hey, you don't eat these, right?
Like in terms of legality, well, I mean, like it's a state park for these bighorn sheep, so there's not going to be any there's no open hunting season. I don't even know if they have any draw hunts for mule deer out there. I have to look that up. But I think the biggest part of the campaign I've seen, I've been traveling a lot, and we'll talk about the next thing I'm working about, which is big time in terms of like safety and all that. Yeah. But like in Estes Park, for example, there's just signage everywhere. There's always a reminder: don't pet the elk. Don't try to steal the baby moose. And when we were in Yellowstone, and the Houston Safari Club Foundation has so generously contributed for the last 4 or 5 years to our Higher Continental Wildlife expeditions for kids facing special challenges. And, and you take kids out that have never been around any of this stuff. And, I had to tell a boy who'd seen a mountain his whole life every day when it was clear skies, never been on one. And he's all of a sudden enthralled with this. And he sees these 2 big old mule deer bucks fighting. And I have to grab him by the shirt and pull him back now. Mm-hmm. The excitement was there, but you have to educate. And so I think there's always that educational element. And then, some people have zero idea about any wildlife. So anything with, horns or antlers, my God, it must kill you, And so you have to kind of like calm people down. No, there haven't been a lot of, bighorns breaking in homes, killing people or anything like that. So it's always a balancing act with the public,
Yeah.
So, Ramon, you can't do like you did in Yellowstone trying to ride the buffalo, and that time they got thrown up in the air. You can't try to ride a bighorn sheep.
Ignorance of the law doesn't excuse you, but
I laugh every year when I see those new video clips of people going, I'm going to walk up here and pet the buffalo, pet the bison.
I've been there. I watched that and photographed it in 2021. It's always somebody from like Ohio, it's never been around any wildlife. And this Ohio plates pull up and these people and they were talking. I'm like, oh my God, it's, we don't see this in the city. So they're probably from like Cleveland or somewhere. And there's just, when you pull in the Lamar Valley, there's these little parking spots you pull into, and there's like a little barrier about this high that you can't go past. And I'm there because there's a ton of bison in the distance. There's just mega bull coming down the trail, and I'm just kind of waiting for him to got my lens on. And so he gets right next to like the barrier. He goes, oh my God, honey, I'm going to get a selfie. And I'm like, ma'am, haven't you seen the signs? She goes, oh, it's not going to hurt me. I said, I'm going to photograph this, and I'm going to have my viral photography moment. And I told her this. And so she's leaning over the post, and thank God the bison's like, whatever. And he kind of just turned. But I got a funny picture of like the people of Yellowstone. You know what I mean? It was like, it's people most of the time that just live in some city environment, or they've never been around like Western wildlife, But the next level of that is I've been working this year on an incredible project with great white sharks. And I've been to Cape Cod twice on this project, and seeing the public like educational efforts they put into an area where there are many great white sharks on the beach, is a different level of like that public spot. I mean, so February 26th, 2024, a great white shark named Libeth showed up 100 yards from the surf at South Padre Island, all 2,600 pounds of her. Wow. And she had a satellite tag in her. Someone shared this on Instagram. I saw it immediately. I'm on the phone calling. I mean, I have a great white shark tattoo, so I'm kind of into them, I found this fishing guide who helped put the tag in her in South Carolina on December the 8th. So December the 8th, 2023, she makes a journey in February 26th. She's at South Padre. Found out about this group called the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, who do this tagging work. And they also are big time into education and public awareness. And I got invited out to a media event at their Shark Center in Chatham, Massachusetts on Cape Cod. And then me and my friend Paul Fazinski, we went out and we're working on a documentary about the return of great whites in the Gulf. And we got to go out with them in September. And they're doing a drone study because apparently a lot of these great whites have crop scarring, kind of like manatees do in Florida. And so they're taking a spotter plane, finding a great white, taking the drone and, getting the exact location. And then they're trying to film it. I think it's like 8 to 10 minutes. And then they'll approach it at different angles and ways and speeds, seeing what. And so we got to go do that. We got to see 4 on the drone, 3 with our eyeballs, and 1 12-footer 5 feet below us at the boat right now. So the little kid who saw Josh, crazy person, and wanted to get in the water was like alive and well at that period. And so their public safety thing is crazy, guys. I mean, like, walk onto this beach and there's this big sign. It says, it's crazy. It was like, warning, extremely dangerous currents. Please consider not kayaking, not wading, not swimming. And also says a thing about rogue waves coming over the Cape or whatever it was going on. And then you go over the hump and there's a sign and it is about a 5-foot sign. I got a picture of me in front of it with a great white shark. And it says, people have been killed by great white sharks in these waters. Wow. Right. So we're out the next day and me and Paul are filming and I'm talking on camera and we're trying to capture for the documentary. And I look over and there's some dudes surfing, right? And they're probably 100 yards from the sign that says people have been killed in these waters, So there's different levels of, it's one thing for public safety of don't mess with an elk. And then there's another one in the fear process of like, hey, great white shark,
Yep. Yeah. So let me just ask this, because I don't know if we're ever going to talk about great whites again on the show, but people die from great whites, not because the great whites are like in the movies, right? They're just, can you explain how people die from great whites?
Yeah. It's really interesting. There's a ton of great whites on Cape Cod and they've had one attack in like decades. They're just not really after people, they're after seals over there. That's their main order of business, but they eat other stuff as well. And most of the time when someone's attacked by a great white, it is often in a swimming area or a surfing area. And, top of the water looks kind of like a seal, the silhouette, and they just come up. And they're not real worried if it's me or you. They're not targeting us, but let's hit a guy this time. Boom, And then the problem is if you get hit by a 2,500-pound shark that has jaws as wide as my chest, there's a good chance you're going to bleed to death or whatever. But there, for the presence of great whites and concentrations in some areas in the number of attacks, it's actually really astounding. Statistically, I guarantee you there are more people that are like whacked by an elk. Not probably not killed by elk, but have like an unfortunate situation. And what's interesting is Cape Cod area, the current generation of people did not grow up with great whites. They just weren't there in large numbers. Mm-hmm. But we talked, I'm sure you guys have talked about the North American model for wildlife conservation. It also applies to fisheries. And the Marine Mammal Protection Act in the 70s started protecting these seals. Now there's all these seal populations. Well, the prey base went up, the predator base went up. But what interests me the most was about 20 years ago, next year in 2005, a friend of mine was like 19-year-old charter captain, had a satellite phone. He calls me one day, and I knew he was fishing that day. Chester, what does a great white's teeth look like compared to a mako? Because they're both in the same branch. They look similar, certain sizes. So, well, a mako's kind of jangly, and a great white's perfect triangle. And he just got real quiet. I'm looking at a great white shark, and it was off Sabine Pass. It was 55 miles offshore. he said he pulled up to the rig and all the rig workers are pointing down. Look, big shark. They've been watching this shark. They didn't see it. And they, put the rig hook or anchor, whatever they did. I think they put a chum bag over, and all of a sudden, white shark comes around the boat, spent a few minutes. Well, I wrote an article for Tide magazine at that point called Jaws in the Gulf, and I dug up some historical references of Jaws, great whites in the Gulf, a Freudian slip there. Stories of 3 great whites caught in 1 week in 1955 or 4 in Port Aransas, Texas. It's long lining stuff from Japanese fleets in Florida. But what's happened is they eliminated a lot of the gill nets and stuff that were ravaging our redfish and other fisheries. Well, when they took the gill nets away, what happened is these young great whites that are born in the Atlantic, they come into cooler waters and things during the winter, and they were getting caught in nets. So that's been eliminated. The seal population's up. Now the great white's returning to the Gulf of Mexico. So we got a documentary that'll be out and just in time for the 50th anniversary of Jaws about the return of great whites in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's been pretty cool. And I have a blog now called gulfgreatwhites.com. It's all about great whites in the Gulf and great white sharks. And people need to check out the Sharktivity app, which is the Great Atlantic White Shark Conservancy's app. And there's another group called OSearch, been doing it a long time as well. They have a great app. They have multiple great whites that are popping up in the Gulf on their tags as well. But the one that Lee Beth showed up right on the beach at South Padre. Like she's going to make a statement. I'm rolling up to the top tourist destination for people and we're going to hang out,
Yeah, that's cool. Was this one of the signs?
That's the sign. That is the sign. I have a picture of me in front of that sign.
I'm tempted to know how tempted you were to steal one of those and bring it home. I could just see you putting it on the wall at your house.
Dude, I would totally have it right here. It was totally awesome. Yeah, it was right behind us, and that was on multiple beaches. We saw that sign on multiple beaches. That one got me because it's like rogue waves, dangerous currents, great white sharks, surfers.
Know your risk when entering the water. I would take that to heed. I would heed that warning.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, here we have the watch out for the flesh-eating bacteria in the beaches. It scares me more than white sharks by far. But anyway, that's been an interesting project this year. That's been a cool. And what I really, besides just the kid in me, is the fact that stuff supersedes fishing and hunting in terms of public interest. It is so much bigger. And so it's a way to use these things to teach about scientific wildlife management. It's a way to draw people into conservation that's paid for by fishermen and hunters. And so I always try to make teachable moments out of those because a lot of this even benefits like Dingle Johnson dollars, which are excise taxes on sport fishing and everything like that. So if a great white shark comes up and takes the trout on your stringer, you can blame the Dingle Johnson Act because it probably had a helping hand somewhere.
That's a great. You kind of skimmed over that point. That's a great point for those people who are listening that do like to hunt and fish and have the opportunity to engage people in a conversation that don't understand hunting and fishing, why we do it, and why it's a conservation tool. Obviously our seas and our oceans are nothing what they used to be. We need to do a better job of managing those. But, I'm not a marine biologist. I'm not an oceanographer or those things. But, obviously the things I read always says that, illegal commercial fishing is pretty much doomed a lot of our fish populations. But regulated ethical hunting and conservation practices, you make a perfect point of, let's talk about sharks. Let's talk about how science has brought back sharks or turkeys or sheep.
Yep.
And then let's talk about where those dollars come from. It's kind of a stair-step approach where you can back into that conversation about how important hunting and hunters, fishing and fishermen, fisher persons, or whatever you want to call them, are to wildlife species and habitat.
You're right. And we, our Higher Colony Wildlife, the Houston Safari Club Foundation, give us a wonderful grant for our Colorado expedition this year. Of course, kids got to see some elk, and we just had an overabundance of mule deer. It was unbelievable amount of mule deer that we encountered. And then we did one in Tennessee in the Smokies, and that's a fairly recently recovered elk population. So we weren't able to get deep in the North Carolina part because of the hurricane. It happened a few weeks earlier, in North Carolina. But we found some near Cherokee, and I'm just sitting there telling these kids and their families, I'm like, because one of the families asked, "Hey, how this elk thing's really cool. And they're from Tennessee. How can we get involved in something that might help this? I said, you need to join the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I said, they're doing work in your state with this right now, and they're really doing it, and $100 are funding this, and a hunter-based conservation organization. So I think if we're intentional about some of those things, and they're not big leaps, they're realistic links, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
I'm wondering what I have to do to be eligible to get the Houston Safari Club to send me to Colorado.
See, do you have any talents outside of like doing this? Can you do videography? Maybe we could get you on maybe I could put you in a backpack. Can we like stow you away, and I'll help you. I'll smuggle you out of here.
You could help Chester maybe be a mentor for one of his trips and that sort of thing. You apply for a grant, we could cover your expenses, but you got to pass a background check first. And I don't know about that.
We look at arrest records.
And Chester's background check is much stiffer than the government's with our kids. So
yeah.
It's a real thing. Absolutely. Ramon can cook though.
I can. Now that's true.
That's cool.
So you always need a camp cook.
I'll break him out. I'll break him in some kind of swamp here in Texas, some hog adventure or something, and we'll see how it goes.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Give him a knife and say, there he is.
There he is.
Do a little grab and stab. Chester, I want to remind our listening and viewing audience about your greater work that you do on a constant basis, Higher Calling Wildlife. Would you tell our audience, remind them again what that mission is all about, and how you came up with the name Higher Calling?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. Me and my wife have a ministry outreach, Children's Kingdom Ministries, and our mission is to bring the love of Christ to hurting children through wildlife encounters. Hurting children, maybe terminally ill, life in the foster system, depression, which is ravaging kids, or we've even been privileged to work with a group that brings sex trafficking victim young people to us. And we have a thing called Wild Wishes. It's like meet your favorite animal kind of thing. But Higher Calling Wildlife is like our expedition branch of that, where we get to spend a little more time with the kid and their families. And we've been doing them, and we've done them in Texas. We've done them in 7 of them in Colorado. We did them in Yellowstone this year, Smoky Mountains, Florida, the Everglades. And it's getting those kids out to these places, because what happens is, and this is really my motivating factor on this, if a child is, just bluntly, like a little girl that we had that was raped, if something horrible like that happens, or a health diagnosis or loss of a parent or something, if it happens on March the 15th, life never gets better than them in their mind than March the 14th.
Right.
It's like there's a cap on how good life can be. They're always waiting for something horrible. So it's our way of letting them know, despite whatever horror this life has brought them, that good things, people love them, God loves them, and great things can still happen for their life. And that's really what it's about. And the expedition part came, I was praying on January the 3rd, 2019. I'll tell you the date. I don't remember a lot of dates either. That's the thing. I remember that day. And I heard higher calling in my spirit. And I knew there's a scripture about seeking the higher calling of prayer. But the Lord really put it on my heart that there was more. I needed to go back to my roots. See, I work in the outdoor media business. If you want me to write an article or do a podcast about bass and you got to check, I will do it, because I like all of it. I love all of it. But he said the Lord was I really felt pushing me to go toward things that I would have written about if I could have chosen, like, this is what I'll be specializing in. And it was wild sheep, wild turkeys, mountain wildlife, flats fisheries, that kind of stuff. And I knew I had to kind of put the two together. And so our first, this is a great feel-good moment story here for you guys. Our very first trial at this was in December 2019. A kid named Rihanna Holloway, she was 19 at the time. She came through our Wild Wishes program. Her wish was to meet a sea turtle. She has cystic fibrosis. And she called us after she graduated high school and said that our program messed her up, she said, because now she wanted to change her life and become a wildlife conservationist. So we're like, she goes, what does that mean? And so that went to months of text messaging back and forth of every angle of conservation. So I called my friends out there at the Texas Parks and Wildlife office in Alpine that do the sheep program at Elephant Mountain. And I was talking with Mark Garrett. And Mark said, I said, hey, because I'd brought a boy out with me to do photography. He was a kid with my friend's young, like 17-year-old son, just to ride with me, and he liked it, but he wasn't like heading toward conservation, I said, can I bring this? Me and my wife bring this girl. Mm-hmm. He goes, how about this? You bring her on a bighorn capture.
Oh, so wow.
We got to bring Rihanna on a bighorn capture in 2019, and I will forever, my whole life, salute Mark and that crew, because we're happy to be there, observe, photograph. I was doing some media work while I'm there because I got to cover this, right? And he said, Rihanna, you're going to do everything everyone here's doing. So he let her collect a blood sample. He let her collect an ear clipping, put an ear tag. And the best part is, if you've ever been on a sheep capture, they catch them on a mountain. They're on a tether on a helicopter. It's the coolest image ever. The biggest ram of the day comes down. He walks past all these interns and everything else and goes, you're up. He let her put the GPS collar on the biggest ram of the day. Rihanna graduated from Texas Tech with a wildlife management degree last fall and is working for the USDA.
Yeah, she is.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's really in a nutshell what it's about. But it's just finding ways to help kids that don't have a lot of hope and use wildlife as a tool for that. And we do a lot of photography. The basis, most of it's photography, and the reason that is everyone can do it. And everyone's got a phone.
Yeah.
And what we do is we get people to donate used SLR, like Canon cameras that I use. Mm-hmm. And most of the kids now get sent home with a good refurbished camera. And we teach them through, some ongoing things we do about this North America model for wildlife conservation. Then we publish their photos and articles with their bylines to let them know they can contribute to communicating about the conservation of these animals. So that's a cool part of it, and we love it. And we're already definitely doing Colorado again next year. We're going to do Yellowstone at some level, and then we're working on the other ideas.
Yeah, we I appreciate you sharing that story. That's really a phenomenal story. I know you guys don't do it for reward, but it's nice when it comes back around and you're like, you can get up one day and kind of go, you know what? We made a difference in somebody's life. That's Absolutely. Not what we were expecting, but it's what happened, and that's phenomenal. And folks, if you want to learn more about Chester's mission, go to highercalling.net. You can learn about the program. You can also donate there and help support his outreach and youth conservation programs. It's a phenomenal program. That's just it gives me chills to know that somebody who basically was at a point in their life were like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then just a few years later, they've got a direction and they're following their passion. And like you said, those guys who said, here's the GPS collar, let's go to work.
Yeah.
That put her over the finish line. That kind of, hooked her in. So that's a pretty incredible story.
It was amazing. And so, we got some kids that are really interested in some things now and in their own individual states. A kid in Tennessee named Christian really took to the photography thing. He got to photograph elk with me and turkeys in Smoky Mountains. And we have some younger girls that came with us from Orange, where I live. They came, their family went with us to the Smoky Mountains. And the first evening we had black bears like 7 yards from the truck. There was a young black bear eating. He was just gorging on every single walnut under that tree. And so we were in the vehicle with the lens out, and I'm like, it doesn't get better than this for bear photography, So a lot of neat stuff like that. And we're going to be posting. We had 2 award-winning videos this year. Me and my friend Paul Fazinski, I'm doing the Great White video with Higher Calling Wildlife, the Elevation. That is, we're going to be sharing that out again. It won some awards from the Press Club of Southeast Texas, Texas Outdoor Media Association. And we have another one that's about to be released as well. And it's about the Yellowstone expedition. So we're pretty excited about that one because we got some insane footage. It was really good in Yellowstone. The bison stuff, that's kind of what we were targeting. And we had some like mega bulls. I would like to have had a scale on this one bull just for him to step on for a second. Cause I'm like, dude, this is the biggest bull bison I've ever seen in my life, And then the redneck hunter in me is like, dude, if he turned just at the right angle, I'm like, oh man, he'd be Boone and Crockett, But,
yeah.
I digress.
No, I get it. That's why it's called Hunting Matters.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the post that came out today. It's been out for a little while, but I saw it on Outdoor Wire today about the draw for the bison hunt and Blackfeet Reservation.
No.
You need to look in today's edition of Outdoor Wire. They're doing I think it's $10 a try. You can buy up to 20, and they have to sell a minimum of 400 chances or something like that. And you can go hunt on the Blackfeet Reservation for bison, guided.
I'm on it. Oh,
yeah,
that's making notes.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, unfortunately, they didn't draw me for the Kentucky elk tag this year. There's a great conspiracy in the state of Kentucky. It's supposed to have said Chester Moore, and I didn't get the archery tag for elk. So I'm airing my grievances on Hunting Matters.
There you go. Well, I'm sure the officials at Fish and Game in Kentucky will be in touch with you.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Before I forget, listen, if you've got a group of kids that you need passes for the convention coming up in January, just give me a shout and I'll throw you a bunch of day passes for you and your crew.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Me or Chester?
What's that?
Were you talking to Chester or me?
Well, you got carte blanche wherever you go, dude.
I appreciate that. I just want a lanyard so I can kind of just walk around like a big shot.
I'll get you one of these. Oh, you can't see it.
Yeah.
That's weird.
What is that?
It's like see-through. There we go.
Oh, that looks so weird.
I want
your
that.
name tag. Hey, watch this.
Oh,
that looked like Predator from the movie.
Did.
It was like in the tree, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If you hear me start purring, you guys ought to run.
Yeah.
So Chester, you've got another project you've been working on for quite a while now. I call it new, but it's not new to you. But this whole dark outdoors thing, tell us about that. Because I think this is a phenomenal and intriguing approach to the outdoors.
Well, Dark Outdoors is about true crime, wildlife attacks, and strange encounters in the outdoors. Because, as I say in my show intro, the outdoors is a place for solitude and great recreation, but sometimes the outdoor experience goes dark. And it started with me 20 years ago getting ran off a mountain in Northern California, me and my dad, by drug runners. And I didn't know it was called the Emerald Triangle at the time. There's drug runners in East Texas. I didn't know the level of it. And the Forest Service told us we're lucky we were alive. And my snarky reply was, you have a flipping elk crossing sign. Can you put like drug trafficking or something on the, warning?
A big shark.
Yeah.
People have been killed on these mountains by drug dealers.
Exactly. And I would have listened to that. Yeah. But so it's about all of these things, and it's true crime, part of it, but it's not like hovering over and making some idiot evil serial killer a hero. It's about awareness and making people think. So every episode has a missing person, trying to raise awareness of missing people and cold cases of missing people. And we also have a thing called Dark Outdoors Defense, where we share defense strategies, mechanisms, ways people escape bad situations. And then we dive into what people want to dive into. I mean, like the crazy stuff that really happens. Because a lot of this happens in the outdoors, and it doesn't get connected to the outdoors. Like the outdoor media doesn't cover it. The mainstream media might have a glancing blow of like, it happened in this national forest, and that's about it. Well, we go way, way into it. And I'll tell you one. So my number one most downloaded show is about feral dogs. Feral dog attacks.
Okay.
And there was a hunter in Georgia who was almost killed by these pit bulls that were loose in the woods. And then a friend of mine had to shoot his way out of a pack of feral mongrels. And I've had a couple of run-ins over the years. And yesterday, I told you I was hunting today. When I came out of the woods yesterday, I drove about a half mile down the road, and I've seen feral dogs in this set of woods before. There were two big feral dogs chewing on a hog carcass someone had dumped off on the road down there. And so it might be that. And then it might be the really juicy stuff like serial killers, the first episode was about Ted Bundy. I figured if I'm going to start this, I'm going to go out,
go big.
Stephen Michaud, who interviewed Ted Bundy for like 6 months and wrote Confession. I think it was Confessions of a Killer was his book. And Bundy did a lot of his stuff to women he'd take them out in the outdoors, Right. And the line that I remember from this was, I said, if I came upon like a Bundy, I could do backcountry fly fishing. And I had, if I'm seeing kind of rape a woman or something, I'm going to intervene. I mean, what would he have done? He goes, how tall are you? I said 6 feet. He goes, oh, he'd have ran. He's about 5'9". He goes, but then I still get chills thinking about this. He goes, but if you're a woman, he would not have been able to help himself.
Yeah.
Chances are he probably would have already seen you coming, went through this whole thing. So it was like awareness raising. And me and Lisa, who's sitting over here listening over here, we have this friend of ours that I've always said is like the introductory moment to a horror movie. Like she is the opening scene of beautiful woman, wears Daisy Dukes like everywhere all the time. Yeah. And she goes on the back roads looking for arrowheads and stuff by herself. And she listened to that first episode and called me and said, I'm going to get training and get my concealed handgun license. So I said, smart girl. Yeah. I don't want to do an episode about you. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So that's what the show's about, and it's interesting, and it's about to expand to a weekly show. So I've been doing it in seasons, but I found a way to make it work for a weekly show, and we're gonna rock and roll on that in 2025.
That's cool. And people can find the podcast on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, and all the major platforms.
Yeah, Dark Outdoors on Apple. It's on iHeart is a big chunk of my listenership, and it's on Spotify. Everywhere there's podcasts, Dark Outdoors is there.
So tell us a story, if you have one, that you've uncovered for Dark Outdoors along the vein of Bigfoot, UFOs, something like that.
Okay.
Because if we've spent enough time in the woods, we've all heard something that we're like, that's got to be Bigfoot.
I love that stuff, man. I absolutely love that stuff. That's fun stuff. And you start talking to people, like people know I'm the Dark Outdoors guy now. They'll start telling stuff. They'll be like, hold on a second. Let me tell you something that happened in the woods. And they'll be like, so I'll give you a story that a friend of mine who's deceased uncovered. And then I had a person who listened to my episode called me back and was like, I can't believe I found someone finally knows about this, right? So it's a guy named Rob Riggs. He wrote a book about the legend of the wild man in the Big Thicket area of East Texas. And me and my good friend, who's a researcher, Lyle Blackburn, were talking one day and goes, hey, Chester, do you remember your friend Rob, who's passed away, writing about someone seeing like primitive Indian looking people in the Big Thicket? And I said, I do remember that kind of. I hadn't read the book in years. So I went and found the book in my archives, and he, for years, had people who were saying in the Old and Lost River area, multiple Trinity, Upper Trinity Bay into Trinity River, who said that they encountered what they thought were Indians, were like people like getting shot at with an arrow. And the craziest story, one may think it might be true, because this is back in the 60s to the early 80s is the time window, right? So you're looking 50 years ago, right? Plus, was a lineman. Nobody would make a story about a lineman. A lineman was working on thing in that area and looked down. He saw this group of 6. What he said were like Indians looking at him, glaring at him, primitive looking. And I got to thinking, this is coming out of like the hippie movement era and people living in communes. Could it have been like that, or modern people kind of going back and living like a primitive way? Right. And so I ran a show on Riggs' old reports, and I had a guy whose dad was a sheriff down there in the 70s. And this is what's interesting. There were 6 linked to this one sighting, that these hunters were coming out of the Old and Lost River bottoms at night. There were 3 hunters, and they saw people ahead of them, and they were walking without a light. And they're like, what is going on this trail? And they got close, and according to the story, and they said it was like primitive Indians, almost no clothes. And one of them shot an arrow, and this guy said, my dad for years had a Polaroid that they took of that arrow. They went back out in the woods and found it in an evidence thing. He actually went interviewed the people. This guy knew this story from his childhood. So of the craziest, wildest ones I've ever had, that probably tops it. And who knows? I mean, a lot of things are possible. A lot of things 50, 60 years ago could remain hidden. And so if anybody's ever heard of that stuff, please message me. I'd love to do more on that, because that was a big response. And that one just kind of told me, like, you never know what's going to be reported or what could be out there. So that's my current favorite oddball Dark Outdoor story.
That's cool. Yeah, unfortunately, that small tribe is now all working at Chipotle and Starbucks. So
yeah,
kind of a ruin. But
what was interesting, my buddy Lyle and I went back and researched the Karankawa, who were the tribe that was in the Galveston area, and there was this reference that they often mainly would travel in bands of 6 people.
Really?
And this was 6 people in 2 of the reports. So there's a lot of connective tissue. So who knows?
Hey, look, they found that guy on the island, 50 something years after World War II that still thought the war was going on. I mean, I as urbanized and populous as this country is, I still think there are those who are living.
Oh yeah.
As primeval people. I think that's very cool, but I still think there are those people out there. When I was a kid, I used to hunt the pipelines, these up and down hill pipelines in Northeast Louisiana. My dad worked for Columbia Chemicals for 25 years and had these gas pipelines behind the plant where he worked. And we ran across an old still, and it wasn't that old. I mean, it wasn't functioning, but I was like, I was old enough, they would, when we were young, it was a different world. They'd drop us off. I had a 410 single shot shotgun. I could hunt squirrels and rabbits and ducks right there. And they'd drop me off in the morning and pick me up when the sun went down. And I would walk those hills all day long, have a lunch, whatever. Yep. We ran across some weird stuff. And when we came across that still one day, I'm like, well, I was old enough to know what it was and old enough to be afraid. Because it was not non-operational for that long. And I'm like, okay, well, this is not that far remote, but here's a still out in the woods, Yeah,
well, like 45-year-old Chester finds a meth lab a few years back. And I talked about this on my radio shows before I had the Dark Outdoors podcast. I mentioned you got to be careful with this kind of stuff, and some caller calls in, one of these really in tune people, and is like, so Chester, did you confirm it was a methamphetamine lab? I said, yeah, I knocked at the door. And I said, yeah, that's the smart thing to do, because it was either one of 2 things. It was a meth lab and they have an AR and they're keyed up, or it was Jason's shack from Friday the 13th part 2. And I don't want to meet either one of those guys, so there you go.
Yeah. I've had, and I'm sure you've had experiences too. I've had times where I've come across in parts of North Louisiana, which I didn't know about. They had a huge Indian population up there. The Poverty Point area is one of the most bizarre Indian settlements in the entire United States, and the history behind it. They had a whole thousands of Native Americans that were there that just disappeared. They don't know what happened to them. They had all these giant mounds, circular mounds that look like snakes and things like that. It's the largest establishment of mounds in the U.S. And they said these people lived there thousands of years, hunters, gatherers, and agricultural people. And they're like, we don't know where they went or when they left.
It's kind of like the Karankawa, very similar. Like they just gone. There's another tribe. I'm going to mess the name up. The Atakapan or Apakatin. There were ones here close to me, and they were also allegedly had some cannibalistic rites or whatever. They're another one just kind of let gone. So that's interesting about North Louisiana. I like that area up there.
You need to look up Poverty Point and go out there and see it.
I will.
And they just found a new mound on the property. They didn't realize it was officially an Indian mound. I think they found that probably 10 years ago. But it's one of the largest archaeological sites in the U.S. right now, and it's open to the public. But I've been walking along like you, and found shacks in the woods. Found an old church one time that hadn't been inhabited probably for 100 years. That was still standing in the middle of these piney woods up in Northeast Louisiana. So I've had some pretty cool run-ins and discoveries. But I'm guessing the more your show grows, Dark Outdoors, the more calls you're going to get for stories. This is the perfect. This is the kind of thing that attracts people to go, oh, I remember when Uncle Bob told me and Ramon about that time that he saw, a four-legged or a 6-legged giraffe that time, and blah blah blah. And
here's the thing I tell people about all this mysterious stuff. All it takes is one report to be true, right? For there to be really something behind a lot of this stuff. Yep. And when you go out there and you start, I've been into this stuff for years, and you start talking to people have encounters with stuff, and people have brushes with danger that they never talk about, like, get shot at and weird stuff. So it's a place to talk about that, but also hopefully to raise awareness so people, I had a show about rogue waves, crazy story of rogue waves were off from a ship channel, and the guys were in the back of Corpus Christi Bay, and they see a wave that's going across the entire bay. They thought it was a tsunami. It was so big. Wow. And they covered the whole bay, and it was from a ship, and they almost died, And so if we can take all this stuff and make people safe and also entertain them with some crazy cool campfire stories, I'm in,
Yeah. You ever think how many times your life was in danger and you never even knew it?
Oh, that's a scary thought, man. Yeah. Yep. You're right about that. For sure. My closest brush with death that I'm aware of in the outdoors was getting drug under on a trot line in 40 feet of water in the winter in 1997 by an alligator garfish. It was on my trot line. And like an idiot, I put the trot line up, the line in the boat. I saw the gar on the line, and he was about dead, I thought, because they'll drown themselves. They like to breathe there. In the wintertime, they don't do real good in there. So I'm like, goofy me, 200-pound gar, let's get him in the boat by yourself. So I got the gaff hook under that soft spot under his jaw, and I kind of did like this, and he did barely move. I'm like, sweet, man, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to heave-ho him. And I laid the trot line across the front of the boat. Well, when I heaved, he hoed, and, and what happened was the hook caught the bottom of my shoe. And my cousin saw this from like 200 yards away, and he's running his trot. He saw it happen. And he was like, you went in like, I just remembered gulp and look up, like where the bubbles are going. That's my only thoughts I had in my head. And thank God, a 200-pound guy and a 200-pound gar broke the line. But how many times, like you said, were you in Yellowstone and there's a grizzly with sow with cubs right behind you 10 yards away, or, some nut job in the woods. So my slogan is pray, prepare, and pack heat. That's my dark outdoors slogan. That's what we did. We pray, prepare, and pack heat.
Well, I'm just glad that alligator gar didn't perfect storm you off the back of the boat.
It was terrifying, dude. Here's the bad thing. I get back in the boat, and it only took a second. And I'm like, bam, I'll jump up. I'll get myself in the boat, and I'm like, I got to get home because it's cold. I'm worried about hypothermia. I wasn't too far from home. And I go, maybe the gar's still on. So I do like this, and it's not on there. And so if you ever are fishing the Sabine River and you catch a gar that has a gaff hook about that long with the orange handle, please return the handle to me. I like to have it hang on the wall.
Go to highercalling.net, find Chester's contact information.
There you go.
He needs his gaff back.
I do, man.
All right, Chester, we appreciate you. In this week's episode of Hunting Matters with our buddy Chester Moore, highercalling.net. Check out Higher Calling Wildlife, and then follow him on social medias, The Chester Moore on Instagram and The Chester Moore on YouTube, and check out the Dark Outdoors podcast. A lot of cool and weird stories coming up, I'm sure. Chester, as always, we appreciate your time. It's been a lot of fun.
It's great to be on with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hunting Matters is a Houston Safari Club Foundation production, hosted by HSCF Executive Director Joe Betar and Ramon Robles. Produced by Ramon Robles. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For questions or more information, email us at info@wehuntwegive.org.